Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and really dig into the science behind fascinating topics. And today we're jumping into something pretty exciting in peptide research, Ipamorelin.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just another peptide. Researchers see it as a big step forward because of its precision. It's a selective growth hormone secretagogue, and we'll unpack what that means. And to help us do that, we have a fantastic expert with us today, an endocrinologist and peptide researcher who really knows the ins and outs of these systems. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's great to be here. Yeah, ipamorelin is a really interesting compound. It represents a sort of elegant design in targeting the growth hormone system.
Elegant, I like that.
Yeah, it shows how we can aim for more specific effects, cleaner signals, I'm looking forward to digging into it.
Awesome. Okay, let's start basic. For listeners who might know a little about growth hormone stuff, maybe they've heard of older compounds like GHRP2 or GHRP6. What exactly is ipamorelin, just in plain English? And what makes it stand out from those earlier ones?
Right. So at its heart, ipamorelin is what we call a synthetic pentapeptide. Basically, a small engineered chain of 5 amino acids.
Okay, 5 amino acids, got it.
And its main job, physiologically speaking, is to mimic ghrelin, the hormone people often call the hunger hormone. But it does this in a very refined way.
Refined how?
It selectively binds to a specific receptor, the growth hormone secretagogue receptor, or GHSR1A. That's the same target as natural ghrelin. And yeah, it's where GHRP2 and GHRP6 also bind. But here's the key difference. When ipamorelin binds, it sends a very specific signal to the pituitary gland telling it to release growth hormone, GH. And it does this in a distinct pulse-like way.
A pulse, okay.
And this is where ipamorelin really shines its high selectivity. It's really good at getting that GH release going, like as potent as something like GHRP6 in that regard. And this is critical for researchers. It does this with minimal messing around with other pituitary hormones, things like ACTH, which ramps up cortisol or prolactin. Those older ones often trigger those too.
Ah, okay. So it avoids those side effects.
Largely, yes. It's designed to bypass those off-target activations. It's just a much cleaner signal. You get the GH pulse you're looking for in the research without all the other hormonal noise that can, complicate things.
Okay, so if I'm picturing like a control panel for hormones in the body, ipamorelin is like pressing just the GH release button very carefully without accidentally hitting the stress hormone button or the make me super hungry button next to it. Did I get that right?
That's a perfect analogy. Exactly. You've nailed the core idea. It's about sending a clear signal for a targeted effect, avoiding that physiological static you might get with the less refined older compounds. That precision is why it's so valuable for research.
So that precision really does sound like a leap forward. Okay, let's peel back another layer for those who like the mechanics. What's actually happening down at the cellular level when ipamorelin triggers this clean GH pulse?
Absolutely. So that GHSR1A receptor ipamorelin targets, it's a G protein coupled receptor. These are super common fundamental ways cells sense things outside them.
Right, GPCRs.
Exactly. So when ipamorelin activates it, it sets off a whole chain reaction inside the pituitary cells called somatotrophs. The key event is a rapid increase in intracellular calcium levels within those cells.
Calcium rushes in.
Precisely. And that calcium surge is the direct signal for the somatotrophs to release the growth hormone they have stored up. It's a process called exocytosis. They basically spit the GH out into the bloodstream.
Okay.
But what's really, really crucial here is the pulsatile nature of it. Ipamorelin itself doesn't stick around for that long. It has a relatively short action time, and that's by design. It doesn't cause a long, flat, continuous rise in GH. Instead, you get these distinct short bursts. This is super important because it closely mimics how our bodies naturally release GH in pulses, especially big ones during deep sleep.
Ah, so it's working with the body's natural rhythm.
Exactly. Our tissues are kind of tuned to respond best to these pulses, not to a constant high level. A continuous flood of a hormone can sometimes lead to problems, like receptors becoming less sensitive over time or messing up feedback loops. Ipamorelin's pulse avoids that.
Interesting.
And another point, these Ghrelin receptors, GHSR1A, they aren't just in the pituitary. They're found in other places too, like quite notably in the gut, the GI tract.
Oh. What does that mean?
Well, it's opened up research into apamorelin's effects on things like gut motility. This is potentially useful after surgery when the gut can sometimes slow down, causing problems like ileus.
Right, post-op gut issues.
Exactly. So some preclinical studies in animal models have looked at whether ipamorelin can help speed up gastric emptying or intestinal transit by acting on those gut receptors. It's another potential application beyond just the classic GH effects.
That's fascinating, that peripheral action. So it's not just pushing the GH button, it might be helping tune other systems too, and it's doing it in a way that mimics the body's natural pulses rather than just like flooding the engine.
You've got it. That alignment with natural pulsatility is key. It's about working with the body's systems, optimizing them rather than overriding them, which helps maintain that delicate balance, that homeostasis. Continuous stimulation can, sometimes backfire.
Right, down regulation and things like that.
Precisely. Ipamorelin's pulse helps avoid that.
And going back to that selectivity you mentioned, why is that so important, especially when you contrast it with those earlier peptides? What was the big problem they caused?
It was a major breakthrough in the early studies. Ipamorelin was engineered for robust GH release, and it delivers. But its real achievement was doing that without significantly bumping up other hormones, like ACTH, which leads to cortisol or prolactin. To give you an idea, in some animal studies, they used ipamorelin doses way, way higher, like over 200 times higher than what was needed for a good GH response, and still didn't see significant jumps in cortisol or ACTH.
Okay, that's a huge difference.
It is. Compare that to GHRP2 or GHRP6, where you often see those elevations, sometimes even at doses just needed for the GH effect. So ipamorelin's ability to largely ignore those other hormonal pathways, prolactin, FSH, LH, that's what really set it apart. It was actually the first G3P receptor agonist found to have a GH release selectivity similar to GHRH itself.
GHRH being the body's natural trigger.
Exactly. GHRH is naturally very specific, so ipamorelin kind of mimics that clean signal. For researchers, this means they can study the effects of raising GH without all these confounding variables from cortisol or prolactin messing up the picture. It just makes for cleaner, more reliable experiments.
That makes perfect sense. Removing those confounding variables is huge in research. Okay, so we understand the how pretty well now, the precision, the pulse. Let's shift to the what. What benefits have researchers actually observed or reported in studies using ipamorelin or similar GH secretagogues? What outcomes are showing up in the literature?
Right, moving from mechanism to observed effects. And this is where it gets exciting, though we do need to be clear, a lot of the direct human data for ipamorelin itself is still building. So some benefits are inferred from what we know about GH physiology or from studies on closely related compounds.
Okay, understood.
But generally, the research points towards several key areas: potentially enhanced sleep quality, support for recovery and tissue repair, interesting effects on body composition, and even some hints towards benefits for bone health.
Let's start with sleep. That sounds really compelling.
It really is. There's quite a bit of evidence suggesting that boosting GH pulsatility can positively impact sleep architecture, especially that deep, slow-wave sleep.
The really restorative stuff.
Exactly. Now, while ipamorelin itself hasn't been the star of massive human sleep trials yet, its mechanism is very similar to other GHS compounds that have been studied quite thoroughly, like the oral one, ibutamoren, or MK677. In one study with healthy young adults, ibutamoren led to about a 50% increase in stage 4 slow-wave sleep duration. That's a big jump. And over 20% increase in REM sleep, too, compared to placebo.
Wow, 50% in deep sleep.
Yeah, significant changes. And in older adults, similar GHS treatments showed increases in REM sleep, and faster entry into REM sleep reduced REM latency.
Okay.
This all fits perfectly with what we know: natural GH peaks during deep sleep. So the thinking is, by promoting a more robust, maybe more youthful GH pulse pattern, ipamorelin could theoretically support better sleep quality and depth. And importantly, it seems to do this without messing up the overall sleep cycle structure. For aging populations where deep sleep often declines, this is, potentially very significant.
Absolutely. Better sleep quality is a massive potential benefit. Okay, what about the next area? You mentioned recovery and tissue repair. GH is famous for that, right?
It is. GH plays a fundamental role in growth, regeneration, repairing tissues after injury. So because ipamorelin triggers these nice GH pulses, the idea is it could support these processes, especially when the body's under stress.
Like intense training or dieting or injury.
Exactly. And we see hints of this with related compounds. That Ipamorelin study, again, when volunteers were on a calorie-restricted diet for 2 weeks, the group getting the GHS maintained a positive nitrogen balance.
Meaning they weren't breaking down muscle as much.
Right. It indicated they were preventing muscle protein breakdown, maybe even building some. The placebo group, meanwhile, was losing nitrogen catabolism. So this anti-catabolic effect suggests compounds like ipamorelin could help preserve muscle during dieting or recovery.
That's huge for preventing muscle loss.
It is. And there was another trial, this time in elderly patients recovering from hip fractures. A really tough situation. GHS therapy, again MK677, given daily for 6 months, not only raised their IGF-1 levels, but also led to some modest but statistically significant improvements in functional recovery.
So helping them get back on their feet, essentially.
Yeah.
That's the implication, yeah, facilitating rehabilitation. And this is where ipamorelin has been looked at specifically post-surgery gut recovery. In animal models of post-op ileus, where the gut slows down, ipamorelin helped speed up gastric emptying and intestinal transit.
Okay.
A human trial in abdominal surgery patients showed similar trends towards faster bowel function return, though it didn't quite hit statistical significance. Still, it points to this broader potential activating Ghrelin receptors in different tissues might aid recovery beyond just muscle, like in the gut, maybe even wound healing. It's a focus for regenerative medicine research.
So it's really a systemic recovery aid, potentially, not just muscles.
Got it.
Now, you mentioned earlier that context, especially diet, really matters. Let's talk about body composition, fat loss, muscle gain. This gets a lot of attention, but it sounds like it's not always straightforward.
Exactly. Nuance is absolutely key here. We know that raising GH and IGF-1 levels, like with GH therapy, generally leads to better body composition, less fat, more lean mass. Clinical trials show this pretty consistently in adults. And secretagogues like ipamorelin aim to do the same by boosting the body's own GH. The idea is higher GH-IGF-1 promotes fat breakdown, lipolysis, and protein building synthesis.
Makes sense.
And animal studies do show anabolic effects with ipamorelin, like it significantly boosted weight gain in GH-deficient mice, bringing them closer to normal. Even in normal mice, it added some weight gain.
Okay, so it works in animals.
Yes, but here's the critical nuance. In one key study, a good chunk of that weight gain with ipamorelin was actually fat tissue. They also saw increased food intake and higher leptin levels early on.
Ah, so the appetite effect kicked in.
It strongly suggests that, yes, the Ghrelin-like appetite stimulation likely drove increased calorie intake, leading to gains in both muscle and fat in that specific context.
Right, so it's not automatically just lean gains.
Not automatically, no. Other human studies with different GHS compounds have shown lean mass improvements without fat gain, but that was typically when diet and calories were carefully controlled.
Okay, so the diet is the crucial modulator.
Absolutely. Ipamorelin can create an environment that supports muscle growth and preservation and potentially helps with fat loss by boosting metabolism. But your overall diet, calorie balance, activity level wrong, those are the factors that ultimately shape the body composition outcome in a research setting. It's a tool, not a magic wand. It works within the system.
That's a really important clarification. It's about the whole picture. Okay, beyond muscle and fat, any other areas? You mentioned musculoskeletal effects.
Yes, and this is quite interesting. Research hints at benefits for bones and connective tissues, too. There was a notable study in rats showing ipamorelin could directly stimulate bone growth.
How did they measure that?
They looked at the tibial longitudinal bone growth rate, basically how fast the leg bone was growing longer. Rats getting ipamorelin 3 times a day for 15 days showed a dose-dependent increase in this growth rate. And what was really interesting was this happened without big changes in their circulating IGF-1 levels. It suggests the GH pulses themselves might have directly stimulated the growth plates in the bone. The rats also gained body weight consistent with an anabolic effect.
Direct effect on bone, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. Other studies found ipamorelin could help counteract bone loss caused by things like glucocorticoid treatment in rats, which is a known issue with some medications. Now, these are preclinical findings, mostly in rodents. They definitely raise the possibility that maybe in humans, these compounds could help with bone density or maybe assist growth in GH-deficient kids. But, big caveat, we need clinical confirmation in humans for these bone effects. It's still an area of active research.
Understood. Preclinical promise needs human data.
Exactly. And then more broadly, just by boosting GH and IGF-1, you might see other general wellness benefits, things like improved collagen synthesis, which is good for skin, joints, connective tissue, maybe enhanced immune function. These are areas often linked to GH therapy and are plausible downstream effects worth investigating further.
Okay, that covers a lot of ground on the potential outcomes. Let's switch gears to the practical side for researchers. Protocols. How is Ipamorelin typically used in studies? Administration, dosing, timing. How long do these studies usually run?
Right, the how-to for research. Administration is almost always subcutaneous injection just under the skin. Like most peptides, it doesn't really survive digestion, so taking it orally doesn't work. Its bioavailability that way is negligible.
Okay, so injections, what about how long it lasts in the body?
It has a pretty short half-life, roughly 1.5 to 2.5 hours. It clears relatively quickly.
Ah, okay, so that explains the pulse effect too.
Exactly. And it's why research protocols often use frequent dosing, maybe 1, 2, or even 3 injections per day. The goal isn't one quick hit, but to generate recurrent GH pulses, mimicking that natural rhythm.
Makes sense. Any common timing strategies?
A very common and physiologically smart approach is a once-daily injection right before bed. This aims to sync up with and amplify the body's natural nighttime GH surge during deep sleep.
Piggybacking on the natural rhythm.
Precisely. But other protocols might use twice daily or 3 times daily doses, maybe spread out depending on whether the research focuses on overnight recovery or maybe daytime effects related to metabolism or anabolism.
And the doses themselves, do they vary a lot?
They do. Animal studies often use higher doses based on body weight compared to what's typically explored in humans. The main published human trial specifically using Ipamorelin, the one for post-op gut function, used 0.03 milligrams per kilogram of body weight twice a day for a week.
Okay.
In other research contexts, maybe looking at wellness or body composition over longer periods, you often see lower fixed doses reported, typically somewhere in the range of 100 to 300 micrograms per injection, maybe once or twice a day. Researchers often start low and adjust based on response and tolerance.
Right. Careful titration. You mentioned timing it for bedtime synergy. Any other timing considerations? And what about combining it with other things? You mentioned GHRH earlier.
Yeah, timing is definitely strategic. Nighttime dosing is popular for that synergy with natural sleep-related GH release, but daytime doses might be used if the aim is, say, to provide an extra pulse related to activity or meals for potential anabolic or fat-burning effects during waking hours.
Okay.
And the synergy aspect is really interesting. Combining Ipamorelin with a GHRH analog like Sermorelin or CJC1295 is a common strategy in more advanced research.
How does that work again?
So Ipamorelin hits the Ghrelin receptor, GHSR. GHRH analogs hit the GHRH receptor. They're 2 different buttons, basically, both telling the pituitary somatotrophs to release GH.
Hitting it from 2 different angles.
Exactly. And the effect is often synergistic. The combined GH release can be significantly greater than adding the effects of each one used alone. It's like that 1 + 1 = 3 idea. It allows researchers to get a really robust but still physiological pulse, which might be useful for studies needing a strong signal for recovery or growth.
That makes a lot of sense, amplifying the natural signal pathway. What about study duration? How long do researchers typically administer Ipamorelin in these studies?
Well, the published research specifically on Ipamorelin mostly ranges from single-dose tests up to studies running for a few weeks. That human post-op study was just 7 days. Animal studies have gone a bit longer, maybe 2 to 9 weeks.
Okay, so relatively short term in the published literature.
For Ipamorelin itself, yes. These durations have shown it can sustain GH stimulation effectively over that period. However, there's always a question with long-term use of any secretagogue about potential tolerance or tachyphylaxis where the body's response might lessen over time. So it's really important to emphasize that long-term safety and efficacy data specifically for Ipamorelin in humans, beyond these shorter durations, is still quite limited. Most of our understanding of longer-term GHS use comes from studies on related compounds like Ipamorelin, which have been studied for months or even years in some cases.
Right, so we extrapolate a bit cautiously.
Exactly. Those longer studies on related compounds suggest GHSs can potentially be used longer-term in research with careful monitoring. But for Ipamorelin specifically, more dedicated long-term human data is definitely needed to fully map out its profile over extended use. That kind of research takes time and resources, of course.
Understood. Good to know the current limits of the data.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put Ipamorelin in contact. How does it compare to its peers? We mentioned GHRP6, GHRP2. There's also Hexarelin and that oral one, Ipamorelin. Where does the Ipamorelin fit in that lineup?
Great question. Comparing them really highlights Ipamorelin's specific advantages. Let's go through them. GHRP6, good GH booster, but famous for making people hungry, like really hungry, plus potential for cortisol spikes at higher doses. Ipamorelin gives similar GH release, but with much less hunger and way less cortisol effect. cleaner.
Okay, less hunger, less cortisol versus GHRP6.
GHRP2, also very potent for GH release, but it tends to raise both cortisol and prolactin. And yeah, it can also ramp up appetite quite a bit. Again, Ipamorelin offers similar GH potency, but avoids those cortisol prolactin hits. Fewer side effects to manage and research.
Right, cleaner on the hormone panel than GHRP2.
Hexarelin. This one is super potent for GH release, maybe the strongest, but it's known for causing desensitization pretty quickly. The effect can fade fast, and it reliably raises both prolactin and cortisol. Ipamorelin is more selective, less prone to that rapid burnout, and avoids those hormonal side issues.
More sustainable effect than hexarelin, it sounds like.
Generally, yes. Then Ipamorelin, MK677.
Yeah.
This one's different. It's oral, not a peptide, and it's long-acting. It gives continuous GH stimulation, not pulses. Very effective at raising IGF-1. But that continuous action means sustained appetite increase, and there's a known potential issue with decreased insulin sensitivity over long-term use.
Ah, the pulse versus continuous difference is key there.
Absolutely. Ipamorelin's intermittent pulsatile dosing is less likely to cause those chronic issues like insulin resistance because it's more like the body's natural pattern.
Okay. And lastly, the GHRH analogs like sermorelin.
Sermorelin, CJC 1295. These work differently, hitting the GHRH receptor. They tend to be milder on their own, but are great for supporting a physiological rhythm. And as we said, they're often combined with Ipamorelin for that synergistic boost, hitting both pathways for a really robust natural-style pulse.
That's a fantastic comparison. So if you drew a spectrum, maybe most selective, most pulse-like on one side, that's Ipamorelin, and maybe most continuous, most appetite-driving on the other end is Ipamorelin. Is that a reasonable way to visualize it?
That's a perfect summary. It captures Ipamorelin's niche beautifully right there in the clean, selective, pulsatile zone. That's its sweet spot for researchers.
Got it. And just to circle back on appetite one last time, we know GHRP6 could be intense. You're saying Ipamorelin is gentler. Is it still something researchers need to actively plan for or manage in studies?
It's definitely gentler, noticeably so. Because it still tickles that Ghrelin pathway, some people might feel a mild, short-lived increase in appetite, but it's generally much less pronounced than GHRP6 or the sustained hunger from ibutamorin.
Okay, mild and transient.
Usually, yes. And again, context matters. If the research goal involves fat loss, timing the dose carefully around meals or sleep can help manage that mild nudge. If the goal is mass gain or rehabilitation where extra calories are actually helpful, that slight appetite boost might even be seen as a small benefit, provided it's met with quality nutrition. So yeah, the lever exists, but it's not a sledgehammer. It's manageable with planning in the protocol.
Right, the lever exists, but it's not a sledgehammer.
Manageable.
Got it.
Okay, critical topic,
Yeah.
safety and tolerability. What does the research say here? What does Ipamorelin generally avoid doing, which sounds like a big part of its appeal? And what do researchers still need to monitor?
Absolutely crucial. And yes, a lot of Ipamorelin's favorable safety profile in research comes down to what it doesn't do, thanks to its selectivity.
Like the cortisol and prolactin. Exactly. At effective GH-releasing doses, it typically doesn't cause those significant spikes in ACTH, cortisol, or prolactin that plagued earlier secretagogues. That's a major distinction and a big safety advantage in a research context.
Okay. What about reported mild effects? What do people sometimes experience?
Short-term studies generally show it's well tolerated. Common things are mild, temporary reactions at the injection site, pretty standard for any subcutaneous shot. Maybe some transient flushing, mild lightheadedness, or a slight headache occasionally. Some people report mild fatigue or drowsiness, especially with daytime dosing, while others actually report better sleep if timed at night. It seems a bit individual.
Interesting. What about things sometimes linked to GH itself, like joint pain or water retention?
Yeah, because GH affects fluid balance in tissues, there's always a theoretical potential for mild joint stiffness or fluid retention, edema. But honestly, with Ipamorelin's pulsatile action mimicking the natural rhythm, these seem to be reported much less frequently or severely compared to situations with continuous high GH levels. The pulse seems gently on the system in that regard, too.
Okay, so less common with the pulse.
Yeah.
Good. What about longer-term concerns or things to monitor in research?
This is where we need that caveat again. Long-term human safety data specifically for Ipamorelin is limited. We draw insights from related compounds studied for longer.
Right.
Potential risks considered in that broader context of raising GH-IGF-1 over long periods include possible impacts on insulin sensitivity, something to watch carefully, edema in susceptible individuals, and the theoretical concern about promoting growth of any pre-existing malignancy since IGF-1 is a growth factor. Standard precaution for any growth-promoting agent in research requires careful screening.
Standard practice, yeah.
Interestingly, long-term rat studies with Ipamorelin didn't show pituitary GH depletion or damage, suggesting the pituitary stays healthy and dependency isn't a major issue. Still, in any research protocol involving GH modulation, standard practice is careful monitoring. Glucose levels, insulin sensitivity markers, IGF-1 levels, and just overall health markers.
Makes sense.
So the bottom line is Ipamorelin is considered one of the safest, best tolerated GH-releasing peptides studied so far. Its selectivity really minimizes those common hormonal side effects, making it a very attractive tool for research in areas like recovery, aging, and body composition, where that clean signal is highly valued.
That's a really clear picture. So it's clean hormonally, which is great for research, but the usual growth factor common sense still applies. Watch glucose, watch fluid, and be very cautious if there's any hint of existing malignancy. Did I mean to miss anything major there?
No, that's a perfectly responsible framing. That really covers the key considerations for researchers engaging with this compound. And of course, ensuring the quality and purity of the peptide itself is always fundamental in research.
Absolutely. This has been incredibly helpful, really breaking down a complex area. Before we wrap, could you give us that super concise, bullet point summary? Mechanism, key outcomes, and who it's primarily of interest to in the research world?
Sure thing. Let's boil it down. Mechanism. It's a highly selective activator of the GHSR1A receptor, causing short physiological GH pulses with minimal off-target hormone effects.
Okay.
Outcomes. Research suggests support for better sleep architecture, muscle preservation under stress, creating a pro-lean mass environment, and promising preclinical data on bone tissue health.
Got it.
Audience interest. Primarily researchers looking into recovery, healthy aging, body composition optimization, or sleep science, especially those who prefer mimicking natural pulsatile signaling rather than continuous elevation.
Perfect. That's super clear. Pulse over flood, selective over scatter, timing over brute force. That seems to capture it.
Nicely put. That really gets to the core of its advantages as a research tool.
Before we let you go, any final guiding thoughts or principles for researchers working with or learning about these kinds of compounds?
Two things really stand out from the research literature. One, pulse with purpose. Aligning administration, often at night, with the body's natural circadian biology seems key to maximizing benefits and working with physiology.
Harmonize with the body.
Exactly. And two, measure what matters. Diligently track objective markers like IGF-1, glucose metabolism, and relevant subjective outcomes like sleep quality and recovery. Get the whole picture. And, of course, always operate within responsible, ethical research settings with proper oversight.
Excellent advice. Pulse with purpose, measure what matters. Love it. And maybe a final thought for our listeners to chew on.
Yeah.
How might this whole idea of precision pulsing, which Ipamorelin represents so well, change how we think about optimizing our biology? Maybe it's less about constant force and more about mimicking the body's own elegant, rhythmic controls. Something to think about. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. You've made a complex topic really accessible and, frankly, pretty exciting.
It was my pleasure. I really enjoy discussing this area, and it's great to share it with an interested audience.
And thanks to all of you for tuning in to the Deep Dive. We hope you found this exploration of Ipamorelin insightful. Remember that key idea. Precision pulses, not scattershot effects. It's a fascinating frontier in research. Now, before we sign off, the necessary disclaimer. The mentioned products and peptides are not intended to refer to any peptides or products sold by Power Peptides. Products sold are strictly for research purposes and not intended for human consumption. Thanks again for listening to The Deep Dive. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, maybe share it with a curious friend, and join us next time for another deep dive into cutting-edge science. Until then, stay curious.